Hi everyone, this is Ruth tonight with the great panel over here today, and I'm here to talk about caregivers CST training skill program. I'm the founder of Step Up for Autism, and I'm a mother of a son with autism. He's 12 years old, and I hope all of you can join us and get knowledge, get to ask questions even after the panel, and get educated. We are all here to learn something. So I'm gonna go right ahead and not waste your time and have Pamela introduce herself. Thanks, Pamela, and everybody for coming in. And Rosa, Jane, and Sebastian, thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. Ruth, thank you very much for the invitation. I want to say that so I work with Autism Speaks. I am the technical lead for the Caregiver Skills Training Program that we are here to talk about this morning. But I wanted to start off by saying that I greatly appreciate you and people like you. I think that all the folks on the panel and the people that I work with across in countries across the globe, I think of you as is really the salt of the earth, right? Because you are working towards helping other people, and and especially for those of you who are parents, we would all understand if all you focused on was just your own child or children, right? But you also go beyond that and reach out to help other people. So I just appreciate.
Thank you.
Yes. So I will just briefly talk a little bit about the Caregiver Skills Training Program. Those who are on live with us today have, also have experience with actually implementing it. So we will be able to hear from them as well. But just in summary, the CST is a program that we designed in partnership with the World Health Organization. The purpose of the program is to really give caregivers, meaning parents and other family members, with skills, like practical skills that can be used in everyday situations, so for play and just everyday home routines, using those skills to help promote language and social development in children who have delays or have concerns for delays.
Thank you, Pamela. Sebastian, we can have you introduce yourself and you can unmute.
Okay, yes, hello everybody. It's a pleasure to be here, so thank you very much for the invitation, and I hope we can give you useful information and inspiration to do the same as we are doing, or we are trying to do here in South America.
Thank you, Sebastian. Paola, can you hear me? I think she's still frozen. I'll go ahead with Rosa.
Yes, can you hear me? Okay.
We'll go ahead with Rosa while we wait Paula for her network to be up and running.
Thank you very much, Ruth. I'm Rosa Hoekstra. I'm a senior lecturer in psychology at King's College London in the United Kingdom. I'm originally from the Netherlands, in case you wonder where the funny accent comes from. And since about 10 years, I work with colleagues in Ethiopia at Addis Ababa University, but also with parents with kids with autism. Like Ruth, her advocacy work, I echo Pamela's thoughts that really one of the most important partners that we have in our research are the parents of kids with autism or other developmental disabilities, because they push the work and the agenda forward. So I work with people in Ethiopia, and we've done a number of studies on autism and other developmental disorders in Ethiopia. And most recently, I would say about the last 5 years, we've been working with WHO, with Autism Speaks, to adapt and test the WHO caregiver skills training for use in Ethiopia. And we will now be doing a new study that is both in Ethiopia and in Kenya with colleagues at the Kemri Institute and Aga Khan University. So that work will be in Ethiopia and Kenya.
Thank you, Rosa. Jane? You're muted.
Thank you. So I'm Jane, and first of all, thank you so much, Ruth, for inviting me this morning. It's morning my time, and I am so excited to really hear from this amazing panel. For work, I'm a clinical director for an ABA agency here in California, and I'm also doing some work with parents in Africa. We recently started an initiative to train parents, shadow teachers, and other practitioners in Africa, and we are doing that online. And we all know that everything for us professionals has changed during this pandemic. And that's why I think this panel is so critical. And I'm very excited because we have a lot of listeners. They want to hear about what CST is all about. And I'm so excited today. So thank you.
You're welcome. Paula, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Finally,
Oh,
yes.
we've made it. my cell phone finally did the magic. Well,
Okay.
thank you very much. I feel very humble and very grateful for being here today with all of you. But above all, I am a mother of a 16-year-old autistic boy, and being here with the name From Heart to Heart is the most important thing for me. Then I am a lawyer and I do many things, but really I'm very grateful to share my heart with you and that you can share your heart with me.
Thank you, Paula. So we're going to go right ahead with my first question. I'm going to ask Pamela. Can you tell us about how Autism Speaks is working in Africa?
Sure. So Autism Speaks is working in Africa through our Advocacy Leadership Network, our Global Autism Public Health Initiative, as well as the Caregiver Skills Training Program. So I can just kind of briefly walk through our Advocacy Leadership Network is made up of advocates globally. Many of you on the call are part of that network. Yes. And it's a network of caregivers, self-advocates, professionals who are interested in autism and developmental disabilities, and they are all accomplished advocates, meaning that they've been doing activism within their communities. And so the way that we maintain our connections with the advocates is through social media, and also having meetings, every other year or so, where we try to bring people together to exchange, right? Because you are going to learn best from one another because you're in the field doing the work. And so we want to help promote that exchange. And it's been beautiful to watch that happen. And so most recently, we've started doing regional meetings. We've had our first regional meeting, and that one was in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. And so it was really exciting to have more than 15 countries represented in that meeting, and then to see the work that we're hoping will come from that meeting. So that's our Advocacy Leadership Network, and then we also have a Global Autism Public Health Initiative, which is a way that we work with people from that advocacy network to help on a country level to promote policy changes. And so we have worked with representatives from advocacy organizations from Eswatini, from Rwanda. We've begun some of that work in Nigeria. And so we come alongside the organizations to help create a global kind of a advisory council at a country level, and then give advice about whatever developing policies around whatever the country's local priorities would be related to autism. And then, of course, the CST program, which we will spend most of our time talking about, today. So we have that CST program, as Rosa mentioned, began really the first sites in Ethiopia and Kenya. And we've done trainings in Egypt, in South Africa. We are working with Ghana is working to get a team together to implement the program. It's been done in Zambia, And our most recent training was virtually will be with the team in Uganda.
Wow, that's really, really broad. And so tell us how can you really given us, what you're doing, where you're working, how, the pilot program, how it started.
Mm-hmm.
Can you work with us exactly about the caregiver, just that particular topic?
Sure. So the CST is a program that is done in groups. So small groups of caregivers meet with a facilitator, like a group leader, and they meet for 9 weeks or for 9 sessions to go through the material. And the material covers everything from, how to set up your environment to make it easier to interact with your child, to how to talk to them, how to notice when they are communicating, how to keep them engaged in activities, how to use everyday activities like playing and, doing everyday things that you do, dressing, to help work on their language and their interaction. And it also focuses on the caregivers themselves, giving them strategies for problem solving and making sure that they have some skills to manage, their own self-care, to take care of themselves. So so the program, meets in groups. Before a pandemic, we were doing these groups in person. Now we have begun doing them virtually. And it seems to be working where we don't have issues with, connectivity. And it's been very well received. So those caregivers who participate in it really feel that they're getting, they're gaining skills and also enjoy the interaction with other caregivers.
Thank you so much, Pamela. Jen, you want to add on something? Unmute.
The only thing I can add on, Pamela, you did mention some aspects of CST, and would you please tell our listeners what are some of how are you able to really navigate the acceptance aspects, the skill level of the families, and also the stigma, especially in Africa?
Sure. So I appreciate the question about the stigma, particularly, and I know we haven't encountered any community that doesn't have some stigma about disability, right? So this is not unique to African countries. It's everywhere. It may manifest differently, right? But every person is experiencing stigma, and so I think what the program does is help empower caregivers. And just that confidence and gaining skills in how to interact with their children helps to reduce some of that personal stigma that is felt, right? And then having the program just be talked about in communities, other people knowing that this group is happening in this community center or this clinic helps to spread the word and normalize disability. And we also hope that it's bringing kids that are being hidden out, right? So that people can see them. And so it helps to just, that exposure helps to reduce the stigma as well. And so, caregivers are given these skills that can help them in their day to day. And so then it helps to increase their confidence in being able to, to do what they want to do, which is to be able to parent their children with disabilities, just like they do their other children.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Awesome.
Thank you, Pamela. We'll still come back to you. Now my question will go back to Rosa. And Rosa, how was your CST program experience when it was first implemented in Africa? Was it challenging, successful? How did you go around it?
Yeah, so we when WHO started developing this program with Autism Speaks, we jumped at the chance effectively. So one of my first studies in Ethiopia was funded by Autism Speaks. So I was in close connection with Pam and Dr. Andy Shee, also from Autism Speaks. So that's how we knew that this program was in development. And what we had really realized in our earlier studies is that our earlier studies had focused more on what is the experience of caregivers, what are the unmet needs, how can we improve identification of children, and how can we decrease stigma in the community. But one of the real things that we realized is it's one thing to identify children, but if there is no subsequent help, if there is no support, then there is a limit to what the benefit is of identifying them. So when WHO and Autism Speak started this initiative, we were really delighted because it looked to be a program that you could implement in low resource settings. And so really one of the keys for the Ethiopian context, and this is true for most of Africa, is if you rely only on specialists, you can never scale it up throughout the country. It would always be for a limited number of people. And we really wanted to work on a program that you could scale up, that you could turn into the entire community rather than make small. So we were delighted. So very early on, we jumped at the chance and were in 2015 at one of the early sort of feedback meetings at WHO. And just to sort of reflect and echo what Pam said in terms of stigma. So in that early meeting in 2015, I was there with my Ethiopian colleague, Professor Marcus Tesfaye, a psychiatrist in Ethiopia. And I was a little bit conscious. I thought, we are one of the few representatives of a very low income setting. It might be that our experience is very different from everyone else in the room. It couldn't be further from the truth. Nearly everyone in that room said, we need more acknowledgement of stigma and unhelpful beliefs. We can't immediately jump into strategies if parents are still in a completely different system. If they are very uncomfortable about sharing because they feel highly stigmatized or because they feel it's their fault that their child has this condition, we need to address that first. So there is now, as a result, there are effectively 2 sessions that really have big components on this rather than one. So this is really something, I think, much more universal than necessarily Africa-specific. So from then, we worked on the materials, received a later version in 2017. A colleague from PAM came to Ethiopia, Lucia, and someone from WHO came to train 7 specialists and non-specialists in Ethiopia to be able to deliver the CST to parents. And after that, we ran the program first in a clinical setting in Addis Ababa, and then later in a community setting in rural Ethiopia. And overall, our experience has been extremely positive. So parents really like the program. They indicate the program really addresses their needs, so it is relevant to them. They indicate that they perceive the program to be helpful. So they say they can observe changes in their child. I think one big aspect is that it is common in the Ethiopian context to believe that if your child has autism or an intellectual disability, that they are unable to learn. So a parent may have several children, and their one child with a developmental disability, they're not learning to feed themselves or to dress themselves. So the parent thinks, well, they're unable to learn. I need to continue doing it. And with the CST, they start realizing that actually their child does have the capacity to learn. It is just in slower steps. So parents comment and they say, my child can't dress himself, but since I'm taking part in the CST, he holds up one arm so that I can, and it's easier for me to put on the sleeves. And I now have gained confidence that ultimately with these steps, he might be able to learn to do it himself. Or they recognize, he can actually hold the spoon, he can do it. So it's these kinds of things that are very positive responses from parents. The third thing that parents are very positive about is meeting in a group. So in our context, there are lots of parents who did not realize that there were other parents in their community with children like them. So we have worked, especially when we worked in a community setting in rural areas, a lot of the children are still hidden away at home. Even if they live in a small village, they do not know that there is someone else in their village with a child just like them. And so they felt immense relief that they can share their problems with families who are like them. So those are some of the real positive outcomes. Also, on the sort of the service side, psychiatrists and the facilitators delivering the program, there has been a real positive response. So we started training psychiatrists or psychologists in delivering the program, but they are the specialists. So ultimately, we would like non-specialists to deliver the program. But the psychiatrists themselves also really realized this unmet need. So we already, in two hospitals in Addis Ababa, the state hospitals, they are now implementing the CST in the clinic to meet some of the demands, address some of the needs of the families that attend these clinics. So for me, the real positive thing is, yes, the families are appreciative, which is fantastic, but also the people who would potentially need to drive this forward in the longer run, the professionals, the clinicians, they really want the program too, and are really enthusiastic to work on it.
Wow, thank you, Rosa. That's really great. Can you echo that, Pamela? Can you echo on what Rosa has just said?
Oh, yes, definitely. Yeah, so I think addressing the stigma question, it happens through the experience, right, of learning and there being increased exposure, but also there's in the materials themselves, there's discussion of stigma and how beliefs about developmental disability can have an effect on what you do with your child. So I think it gets addressed pretty thoroughly.
And I think there is also, in addition, it gets indirectly addressed. So when a parent feels more empowered or feels more confident, they might feel more confident addressing community stigma. So yeah. As an example of a quote from a dad who said, "I used not to take my child out to the market. I used to hide him at home. But now I'm taking him out and I'm telling people, no, my child has a disability. He's allowed to be here. He's not being naughty." So there are several parents who have raised to us that they feel more confident addressing misconceptions in the community.
Oh, thank you, Rosa. Jane, you have anything to add to the panel, to Rosa?
Actually, Rosa, I am so happy for what you said. That was such a beautiful explanation of what you're doing in Ethiopia. And I know our listeners who are from Africa, they can follow that. And you like mentioning about stigma, that was like awesome. I was just here like saying, yes, that is so good, because many times as professionals fail in that area, and as a result, there is no buy-in. And we know that if parents don't buy in the program, it doesn't matter how many times you train them to do something. So I really like how you make it culturally relevant. And I really can't wait to see where this goes as far as Africa is concerned. I'm speaking for Africa today. Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you, Rosa, and thank you, Jane. Thank you, Pamela, for chiming in. And I'm going to, I know, Rosa, you've been working with in Ethiopia, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How was it? How I know you're still working with on that end. How is it coming? How are parents? I know stigma is for me, stigma is the biggest barrier. Like, I don't know. I think when we can deal with stigma, everything else falls in place. So
yes, it is definitely one of the ongoing challenges. And I think stigma applies at different levels. So one of the members of our team is Dr. Bethlehem Tekela Gebru. So she is Ethiopian, but has been living in London for the last 10 years or so. So I've been working with her on several projects and also now. So one of her recent pieces of work really focused on the stigma and the stigma experience of parents and children. And so she is a qualitative researcher. So that means she interviews parents, or she organizes group discussions to better understand how parents experience this. So what type of stigma are they exposed to, but also how do they then respond to it? And really what Beth's work suggests is stigma happens at several levels. So there is stigma in the community as a whole. So say you need to take a shared taxi and the taxi driver doesn't understand that your child shows difficult behavior. It also happens in the family. So many of our families are actually a mom with her children because her husband may have left her because the husband is blaming the mom on the child's disability. Quite often, the mom is completely socially isolated, so has also been rejected by the wider family, who again blame her. So family stigma within the family is also an important issue. Not universally, though. So you also speak to families who say, I have an amazing mother, and because of my mother, this life is feasible or is doable. Or likewise, you get beautiful quotes from people who get help from the community. So, for example, talking about taxis, someone saying, I took a taxi, another person in the taxi was shouting at my child, and then the taxi driver corrected him and said, no, this child has a disability, he's not being naughty, and you shouldn't talk to him and his mom like this. So there are nice changes or positive examples that beat the stigma. But yeah, so stigma can happen at different levels, and it can also happen at administrative levels. I don't remember who said it, but the sort of limited awareness can also really block you from accessing services, because at all the levels people don't understand autism or different developmental disabilities. So if you go to a regional administrator to share your concerns because your child is rejected from mainstream school and the administrator doesn't understand the needs, then you don't go anywhere. So the sort of lack of awareness and stigma happens at different levels. And so we really need to address it at those different levels.
Thank you so much, Rosa. Very, very important points. I'll go to Paula. Tell us the situation in Argentina about autism from a parent's perspective.
I would like to jump in about the stigma first.
Sure.
Because we're talking about the stigma. And yes, and I was like, yes, that happens here too. That happens here too. And you talk about empowerment and you talk about visibility. This happened a lot in rural areas. Stigma is bigger than in the cities still. But it has really, really changed through collective advocacy. Really, really changed, because we are not afraid to show that our children have certain differences. We empowered ourselves. Stigma comes from fear, and fear comes from ignorance. So what you have to do is to teach others what autism is. That is not the mother's fault. That is not a curse. It's not something that happens to your family that will hurt another one, because stigma is because the other one is different from you and the other one can hurt you. That's the basis of it. So when you get out of that and you learn that it's not your fault, that it has medical or biological causes, that it can be addressed, that you can address your child, you can teach him or her how to, through these skills that the professionals here in the panel know so well. Life changes, but it also changes when you meet with another parent that gives you the tip of how to do that at home. From parent to parent, there's nothing compared with the coaching parent to parent. And what you feel when you feel you're not alone. And believe me, we are not alone. 10 years ago, when we started the movement in Argentina, this was one of our mottos: you are not alone. We are too many and we are not alone. And let's talk about autism, because 10 years ago in Argentina, nobody spoke about autism. And there are so many variants within the spectrum that if you don't synthesize, for example, what we did in one word, the other people don't know what you're talking about. So we got together, and many organizations of autism, and spoke the same language. And we used many of the tools that were already in the world. We barely knew Autism Speaks in Argentina 10 years ago as families, for example. But we knew that on April 2nd, everything was lit up blue. So we started to make that. And we went, for example, to authorities here and showed the Eiffel Tower lit up blue, for example, or other monuments, and says, oh, so that's important, because if they do it in France, of course, in Argentina, we can do it also. So yes, that happens, and that happens in political levels. So we have to take advantage of that, and we show them all the monuments around the world. Now we have very big April 2nd days. We, for example, on April the 2nd, in the city of Buenos Aires, we gather around 16,000 families, for example, only in the city of Buenos Aires, one day. And what happens? Then TV comes, everybody comes, they know that we are there, and that is visibility. It's like a wheel. It's a wheel, a virtuous wheel circle of visibility, empowerment, and public policy. If you need to be seen. You need to be seen, because if you're not seen, you are not heard. If you're not heard, they don't understand your problems. And if they don't understand your problems, you never will receive any solution of any kind. So you need to know that you are not alone, that your peers are your best friends. We always say that when diagnosis comes, your family changes, because sometimes your family does not understand you, or has the stigma, or believes that you're not a good mother or not a good parent. And you find in another peer autistic mother the family that you were needing. And we have blue families. We call ourselves the blue families, blue mothers, and we feel like we are godmothers or godfathers to the children of the other within the spectrum. And we cry with them, and we enjoy when they raise their hand to make the sleeve come, like Rosa said. And that's how we do it. The three components: visibility, empowerment, and through those, you get the public policies. But also, when the other people that don't understand come and see your child that is making progresses, then they say the stigma is, oh, if that little person with that problem can do it, then I can do it. And then changes. And then they look at your child as like heroes, or like they're showing the way, that the effort and thriving. And so they set an example, and that is how the neighborhood also, for example, then help you with the daily things, and then your child grows up and can go and shop something to the grocers, because the grocer knows him and helps you. And so rising your child up is a community thing, not a family thing, and not being hiding. Stigma comes from fear, and fear comes from ignorance. So once you stop being ignorant in what happens to you and happens to the rest, and you spread the word. You have to spread the word. We're prophets here. It's like I'm a believer, and I always believe that what we have to do is just to practice a little Christianity here, and to spread the word, and from one person to the other person, and just respect and listen to the other one. So that to build a community, we're not alone. A country can have public policies, but a country is formed of communities, and communities is formed of families. So if you spread the word from family to family, in the end, you change the public policy.
Thank you, Paula.
That's what we did here.
Sebastian, you want to add to anything to that?
You're muted. You're muted, Sebastian.
Sorry, yeah. Well, it's hard to add anything. She said almost all the important things.
So you trained us.
But yes, I mean, I agree. I agree completely in that. I mean, family associations here in Argentina, as in many other countries, have, I mean, all the achievements and all in all the ways that things have moved forward, like in laws and public policies, and in diminishing of stigma, and going together with other families that are starting the way. I mean, is the most important thing. Is what made things move. in our country, that is where I live, this is particularly
so Sebastian, talk
true.
to us about your organization and how you support your families.
Sure, yes. Well, I didn't say I'm a child and adolescent psychiatry, and the organization I work in is called Panacea, which is an NGO in Buenos Aires, Argentina. We work doing research, training of professionals, awareness campaigns together with the parent associations. We have that luck. We do also intervention, and now we're lucky enough to be working with Pamela and Cecilia Montiel and Autism Speaks and WHO, and with Perina Landolfi implementing the CST training here in Buenos Aires. We have been doing it for 3 years now. And we also could start that because of the help of Paola in particular, but the parent associations in general. They all helped us doing the adaptations and everything. So I can't say enough how important is that what Paola said about communities getting organized, working together. Of course, that in most countries in Latin America and also in Argentina, there is great inequality, and that includes inequality in access to services for families with children with developmental disabilities, especially rural populations, people in smaller towns, as Paola said, but also from big cities. People with social vulnerable people find it harder to get assessment, to get intervention. Very long waiting lists, not enough specialists to make diagnosis, for treatment in public hospitals, particularly, not so many. And in fact, with other countries of Latin America, we organized a research network called REAL, and we made a survey of family needs in the region, and we found there is a lot of people participated, families of children and adults with autism, and there is a lot of frustration in many families trying to access assessment, to access intervention,
40 kilometers,
access
40
school.
kilometers to get a therapist is not possible.
More than some people, some of the answers talked about more than 100 kilometers that people had to travel to get a diagnostic assessment. More like a quarter of the answers were talking about more than 100 kilometers. So, and most of them had to leave their towns to go somewhere else to do the assessment, if they can. Also, you were mentioning stigmatization and discrimination when Paola said it, but it is still important in the region, although I think it's slowly getting better thanks to awareness campaigns. And well, that's why we think that CST can be so powerful in our region. For all the things I just said, I mean, families don't need to have diagnosis to participate, which sometimes is a barrier. It is culturally adaptable to the beliefs and the needs of each community. As Pamela said, parents meet in groups, which help them see that they are not alone and support each other. And also with CST, we train workers that don't need to be specialists, as it has been said also, which makes it easily scalable. But also, these are workers that are already working with the families in their area, so they know their needs and they are usually trusted. So that makes it easier. It's not that you go and install something from abroad, just like a closed package. And it's important because it gives tools to caregivers to stimulate the development of their children, which not only makes the program scalable, but also gives a feeling of competence and confidence to parents regarding their guiding roles for the children. And CST, as Pamela said, concentrates in intervening with children at risk. So it can reach a great population. So that it just needs that parents are concerned about some area of the development so they can enter the program. It also takes advantage of parents' knowledge about their children. We know that most crucial interventions occur in between sessions, in between treatment sessions, in daily interaction with the family, during everyday play routines and home routines. So that's why it is very important to share the knowledge and tools with caregivers. So CST program is, I think it can favor development of the majority of children at risk. And also, when it's not enough, to detect those that with greater challenges that would need more complex level of care and orient families towards those more complex level of care.
Also, Sebastian, what we were talking sometimes when we talk about the CST here is that it helps not only those children with more that are less communicative than others. It's like a broad range. A broad range is not for the most severe, but for everybody, because it's adaptable. So that is very important.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, it's for you just need to have a concern about your child development, and that's enough to enter the program. So you don't need diagnosis. So you can have worries about the development of language, communication, relationships, attention, behavior. So as Paola was saying, it's a broad range of concerns that could take advantage of this.
Thank you, Sebastian. Anybody wants to say something?
I just wanted to
add
what they have been saying by just highlighting how in most of our CST sites, the majority of them, it's a combination of advocacy, community, parent organizations, working with professionals to make sure that the program is implemented well. And I think Argentina is a perfect example of how that has happened. And I also wanted to just highlight what they've already said, which is that it's adaptable, right? It's a package that was a generic package that was created, and that every culture country is going to take it, make sure it's translated, and also that it's appropriate for the cultural context. So that happens because of the partnerships between parents, organizations, and the professionals.
Thank you, Pamela. Anybody else?
I just wanted to tell Paula, I'm really grateful because of what you just said about public policy. Really, communities and families working together to change policies, because even here in the West, that is what has changed the cause of autism and other neurodevelopmental disabilities. So that was a really good point that you mentioned there. And I know our listeners who are listening from Africa, that is something we can start working on moving forward and taking your input.
Yeah, I would like to echo on that. What we do here is how we do this collective advocacy in many ways. But what we would say, you remember the blue piece, puzzle piece? Okay, we say that you have to put your part. For example, if I am a lawyer, I just lawyer up a little bit more for my autistic community. If I am a cook or a driver, I just do what I do, that I am the best at doing because I do it for everyday life. So I am the best, and I just give a little more of what I can do the best. So in the end, the autistic community has the best of the very best, from the designer, the publicist, the lawyer. And when we go there and write, for example, or draft a bill or draft a regulation, we just draft it, and we just look a little bit at our political panorama and say how we can move forward, and you just leave your draft so the politicians get all the merit they need to get, but you're not the author of anything, and that's very important. You are not at it. You just do what you have to do, and let the others do what the others have to do. It doesn't matter who wrote the law. The important thing, or the regulation, or the April 2nd day regulation, I don't know. But let the politicians do what they want to do and take the pictures they want to take. That's their job. But then you have, if you really want to make a change, you just give a little of what you already do, that you are the best at doing, and just give that. We don't raise funds here, we raise human resources, and that's how we do it.
Thank you, Paula. Rosa, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I thought just to add to Paula's and Jane's on public policy, in our work, we also continuously work with different stakeholders, so with parents, with local NGOs that have been started to help kids with developmental disorders, but we also work with the Ministry of Health. And the Ethiopian Federal Ministry of Health is currently writing their new national mental health strategy, and mainly because of the tireless work of autism advocates in the country. So I'm not taking personal credit for this. This is really the autism parents. Developmental disorders will now for the first time be included as a priority condition in that strategy. And that, of course, can then help us to, move things further. Then secondly, I was wondering, Ruth, do you find it helpful at all if I comment on the type of adaptations that we've made to the standard WHO CST package to make it acceptable and feasible in our Ethiopian context?
No, go ahead. We are all learning. Yeah. We want to get as much as we can, because I know after this we will be sending you messages so much, because we want these programs running back at home, because we really have a hard time. I am really particular. I'm really like just listening. My mind is with you guys, because I really work even with people in the rural. When I go home in the rural areas, they really, they're like, oh, Ruth, here is a piece of land, or here is a piece of space. Please do bring something, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm just by myself. I can't do this. So you see, when I'm listening, I'm getting all this, how can I help? I'm getting all this information and ideas. So I'll come back to you guys even after this, because we are all, I am just so, okay. I'll let you, Rosa, speak. I'm just...
So when we started working with WHO and received the draft packages, we organized several interactive workshops in Ethiopia to ask parents of kids with developmental disorders, people who run schools for kids with autism or intellectual disability, psychologists, global mental health experts, so different stakeholders. We asked them their opinion on the actual materials themselves, but also how we were planning to deliver it, and ask their feedback. And the nice thing in Ethiopia is, I think this might depend a bit culture to culture or country to country. So Ethiopians it's changing now because the internet's becoming much better, but they are generally not really types of people who you send an email with a long document and then they'll send it back with track changes and comments. That's not really how they work. But if you invite them into a room and you sort out some really nice Ethiopian coffee, they will comment, and they will really comment. They are not going to say, oh, well, hello, white lady from the West. Yes, we love what you're doing. They will tell you what's wrong. So I love it. And so they've given us lots of comments. And so some of the changes that we've made is we need to address literacy. So the standard materials assume that the parent who is being trained is literate and can read the materials. So we changed some of the materials to make sure that they are also accessible if the parent can't read or doesn't have a high reading level. So that's one of the changes that we've made. Another issue that we addressed is that in the Ethiopian context, it isn't necessarily that common or natural for a parent to play with their child. And quite a few of the strategies in the CST include tips for the parents to do a playful interaction with their child. So we included a bit more sort of background scaffolding to explain to the parent why this is helpful. We then also thought really carefully about the types of toys that they were suggesting to play with. Now, this can be context dependent. So in Addis Ababa, it might be quite common for toys, but in rural Ethiopia, kids do not have toys. So if the material suggests, please pick up a doll, or please, explicitly talk about specific toys and no one in the community has those toys, then that material would be alienating. So we changed that to, for example, give examples. You can play with a leaf, or you can play with a stick, or you can build little figures from the mud that is available in the soil. So those are changes that we made. We also more explicitly addressed physical punishment. So it's still quite common for parents or other adults to physically punish the child, with the idea that that might really be a helpful strategy in addressing the child's problems. So it is not done because they're mean, but it is done because they genuinely think that this will improve the child's behavior. So we have more explicitly than the original materials addressed this. And the last change that we made, and that was one of the bigger ones, is that the materials include a suggestion to include a picture schedule. So to include schematic images of different steps or different phases. And when we discussed this with our community in Ethiopia, and particularly there is one very strong autism advocate voice, Ms. Zemi Yunus, and she runs one of the schools for kids with autism, was the first autism school launched in Ethiopia. And she's like, look, I've been trying to train my staff to use picture schedules for years. It's counterintuitive. We try, and then like people don't pick it up. It doesn't really work at home. Parents don't pick it up. What does work is gestures. So we don't work with these sort of physical pictures, but we are a gesture-based society, and that works absolutely fine. And then the logistical additional considerations, that when you move to rural Ethiopia, there is no printer, there are no images available. So to make a sort of dedicated picture schedule would just be logistically difficult. So if you use gestures, you don't have that problem. So those were some of the changes that we made. And generally, we found that it was very well received. So there weren't really particular issues that parents really say, well, this was completely alienating. So some of the bits are hard. So it's not all easy. It's not all plain sailing. But generally, it's well received. But I do really echo the need for those adaptations. So I would not say just, take the manual and plant it in the community. I think it's necessary to do a bit more work and really see how you can adapt it to make sure that it suits the local context. But you can learn from what has been done elsewhere. So, for example, the changes that we've made, we've sent them to WHO. You can use them. Don't reinvent the wheel. In South Africa, they're doing brilliant work where they've changed some of the images to make them more locally applicable. I know they're happy to share those too. So there's, lots of this work, that the whole idea is that it's being shared.
Thank you, Rosa. Jane, you want to add something?
Not really on what we have talked about, but I really like that idea of cultural adaptations. And for some of the courses that we are doing, we are offering through EDS Learning Institute. We were actually just talking about that, and we started encouraging families to take pictures that are common in their homes and not necessarily depending on the images online, because they may not be practicable, applicable in their homes. So that was really amazing, adapting the materials to make them culturally sensitive or relevant.
Thank you, Jane. And I like that because I remember there was I want to talk just something. I was in the countryside with my son because we went there. I traveled with him. I know when I first traveled there, a lot of adults were sitting on the fence actually looking at me. They didn't want to approach me or my son, but the children were always approaching my son. So I really found it that the children were so eager to know what's wrong with my son than the adults. And adapting in the society or in the community, I had to start with the children, and it looks like the children were the ones who were teaching the parents that it is okay, to come and join me or to know my son. And they will be like, like I would go to, I had a parent who had two kids with autism, and she was like, I don't know what to do. And I noticed that one of the child was also always hugging me because of, I think, sensory or something. So I said, I always use a brush. And she said, oh, where can I get the brush? I said, you know what? Take a corn. You see the corn of the cob. That one, a soft one. You when you rub it, it becomes soft. You can always use it. You don't have to have a brush. You have to adapt with what we have in the community. We don't have to have something that is bought. We can always work with what we have around us. So I think this cultural adaptability, what we can see, what we can use, is really important. Do you want to add? Anybody wants to add anything before we get to the next?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. You mentioned that the children are different
Yes.
from the adults, and that is why in Argentina our movement has become very, very strong in inclusive education, because that is very important, because children learn not to fear, learn that differences, and that learn that the difference are enriching them also. So that is very important. That is a second step to move on. That is the inclusive education from kindergarten.
Thank you. Anybody wants to add something before we continue with another question?
I think probably before we leave Argentina, I'm curious to know whether you are able to access government resources and finances.
Collective advocacy. If you have, for example, April 2nd, just a date. So, for example, generally, they don't mind passing a law on declaring an autistic day. That is not important. It's just a declaration law, But with this declaration law, you have like a green card to be on the park, to summon everywhere around the country. And then, for example, only in the city of Buenos Aires, 16,000. Then in the other city, 9,000. In another city and in a small town also. So when in the average of all Argentina, what happened in April 2nd is so many people, so many voters, so many voters that are there. So what you have to do is to public policies have an agenda. For example, if you have a flood, you have to address the problem of the flood. If you have another issue, you have to address the most important issues. So what we did here was we had autism at the bottom. So when we started with this collective advocacy and making ourselves visible, we were we were thousands of citizens asking for a solution. So from here, we started scaling in the importance of addressing our matter. So if you're not on agenda, you will never receive anything. But if you are in the agenda, then you have chances. How can you be on agenda? Well, just being visible. Because when you're very visible, then the media comes, and then all the media do what the media do. And so that is a community work. When I say that everyone has to make its part, then you have, for example, I am a lawyer. Well, another parent is a journalist, and another parent works in a TV channel, and another parent works in the radio, and another parent also works for the government. Because if, I don't know what the statistics now is, 1 in 68, 1 in 50, I don't know. But suppose it's 1 in 100, for example. I know it's less, but for example, 1 in 100. Well, that means that 1 in 100 families are involved. Because for one person with autism, you have at least 5 persons around that person. So you have to spread the word to those around, and those around spread the voice. And when the voice is very, autism speaks. So speak it up, and you're here, and then you go up here. And when you go up here, then you get the public policies. If not, you are mute.
Thank you, Paula. I know Pamela has some great news that she wants to share. So go ahead, Pamela.
Thank you, Ruth. So I just wanted to, we've been talking about CST being done in a group format, right? And we will continue to do that. But two things, so the work that Rosa and Sebastian have been talking about within countries and the adaptations, that's part of the field testing of the package, right? So it was developed and then it needed to be tested to see, is this something that really works? And it needed to be modified, and that has happened. And so the plan is to publicly release the package at the beginning of the year. So the beginning of 2021, we expect that it will be freely available for sites to use. There will still be the need for people to be trained, right? So we will still have WHO and Autism Speaks trainers, such as Sebastian, available to do trainings for countries that want to have the program implemented within a system, like at a larger country level. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is that there is now an e-learning version of the materials available. And I know Ruth has had a chance to preview some of that, and she could share her thoughts. But it is an e-learning version, meaning that it was developed through an online platform so that caregivers can go in and do have access to the same material that they would in a group in a self-paced kind of way, right? Right now, it's still considered a draft, so it's not widely spread yet, but it will be, and it will be available to anyone. It's in English right now, and so we're looking for parents, professionals who are interested in working with us to translate it into other languages. And also, for those professionals who are on the line, to be thinking about ways that you might use this e-learning version in your work with caregivers. So even though it's developed so caregivers can use it on their own and go through self-paced, it still is something that, as a clinician might choose to use, the program and then coach caregivers through the steps at the same time. So lots of things, to be thinking about. And also I mentioned that we are, even though we, cannot do trainings in person, we are still continuing to do them. We have a new partnership with UNICEF, and we are going to be doing virtual training with Uganda coming very soon. And we'll also be expanding, doing a training in Bulgaria and expanding work that's already begun in Peru. So lots of online virtual options, because we know we need to continue to reach families despite our new challenges with being in person together. And so I'm very encouraged by all the work that I see each of you doing, and I want us to just remain connected to one another and continue the collaborations so that we can continue to serve families.
Thank you, Pamela. Can all of you just tell me, whoever wants to jump in, tell me, what are you guys working on? What's your next step?
Well, I'll start. We make all these efforts for children, but children grow up. And then you have teenagers that have no services, teenagers that suddenly have nowhere else to go when they finish the primary school. And also with the differences that between them, more talkative, less talkative, now services of all kinds. And so to change the paradigm is like children can do anything and the limit's the sky, but teenagers can't, or the adults can't. So with my husband, we have a foundation that now it's for adapting for literacy and for including through literacy, and making adapting tests in easy to read So many children with autism also have dyslexia and other learning issues. And many of them, the problem is not being at school, the problem is not the autism, the problem are the learning abilities. So we are focusing on adapting the text and, for example, for companies, the way the messages are sent to all employees so they can be included. And also this helps other people that do not have autism but have a low literacy. And that's what we do now.
Thank you, Paula. Rosa?
So this month, in fact, last week, we launched our new Spark project. And that is a project that will be run in Ethiopia and Kenya. So I co-lead it together with Professor Amina Abubakar from Kenya. And we will be testing the CST in 4 settings in Ethiopia and Kenya, in rural and urban contexts in both countries. And it will be a very large study of including nearly 500 children. So do what they call a randomized control trial to see. So we've received very positive feedback, both from facilitators and from parents. What we don't yet have at this moment is sort of concrete evidence that yes, the program works. So we have the opinions from parents, but in terms of advocacy and getting, for example, governments to buy into it, it helps if we can show more evidence that the program helps in improving the child's skills, but also in improving the parents' well-being, the child well-being. So that's what our study will mainly focus on. We will also look if the CST provides value for money. So it's one thing if it works, but if it's incredibly expensive, then it will also be difficult to tell a government to invest in it. So we will look at the cost effectiveness. And the study has a broader aim. So in addition to the CST, we want to improve our ability to identify children in the community and to identify them earlier. So we have had some success in Ethiopia in identifying children, but the children tend to be older than 5, often older than 7. And that might, in practice, mean that a child has been hidden away at home for 7 years, with the parents struggling for 7 years. So we would prefer it if we can identify them earlier. And we have been mainly successful in identifying children that are very severely disabled. So in addition to their autism and their intellectual disability, maybe they also have a physical disability or they are blind. And it's important that those children are helped, but we acknowledge that there is a whole group of children who also are in need, who we may not have yet identified. So in this new project, we want to improve identification, community awareness, combat stigma, and then the children that we identify will be invited to take part in the CST. So that will be my job for the next 4 years.
Thank you, Rosa. Sebastian?
Yes, okay. Yeah, well, here we started slowly with CST because it's only 3 of us, master trainers, but it's getting bigger little by little, and as soon as people get to know it and they ask us for training, and so people in other provinces are now we are planning implementation in 3 cities in the country now, so we're getting out of our city. And we are also starting the online version a month from now, approximately. We started already the theoretical theory training, and we're starting the program soon. And we're also working here with, access to diagnosis. We are validating a free tool to support clinical assessments, so that it can, people in all the cities in Latin America that are not big cities with all the resources and the trained people can also reach diagnosis, which will, like a standardized diagnosis, which will also help with research and prevalence studies and such.
Thank you, Sebastian. Jane, you want to add anything?
I can say what we're doing or what we are planning to do for families in Africa. As I had mentioned earlier, we have EDS Learning Institute, and the overall goal is to ensure that all children with special needs are receiving services from a trained parent or professional. And we say we are not going to stop until that has happened. And with CST also involved, I believe that we can get a lot done, because there's one thing I always say, an educated parent is an empowered parent. So CST, continue doing what you're doing. It's an amazing program. I have looked through it. I did after Ethiopia. The language is good for parents. They can understand. You have taken the technical terms and completely removed that. So when you say that it's adaptable to every family, it really is, because I have been able to see that part of it, not the new one. And so the sky is the limit. And as I said earlier, I can't wait to see how these resource scarce countries are going to change through parent or caregiver training. Because as we all know, like during this pandemic season, we as professionals, we had to become innovative. And we have seen that telehealth does work too. So I hope we are going to really do what we can through one-on-one, through telehealth. We are not limited to what we can accomplish together.
Thank you so much, Jane. I really want to piggy on that. It's really the version that I have seen that Pamela sent me, the e-learning version. It's so simplified that it is so easy. And even when I'm explaining to parents, like when we are doing it together on the phone, it's easier for them to give me answers, and they will tell me, okay, let's do this. It's something that it's achievable. It's achievable. It can be done. We just have to work hard on it. And a lot of organization leaders have reached out to me from Kenya that they would want to do this together. So I know with that we can bridge. There's a huge. We can really have the huge gap that we're missing from professional CST can really be very important in this thing. I'm encouraging all parents who are watching here, organization leaders. If you want me to email you, I can email you. We all look at it. We all give feedback. We will send it back to Pamela to review the feedback. It's really, really encouraging to see that they are trying their best to make sure we are all educated in whatever level. If somebody doesn't understand, there is a leader who can always break it down, and they like it because they understand that we are there for him. CST program is really a huge. It's something that is, for me, it's very huge when it comes to parents, because that's what they need, especially when this pandemic hit. That is when we woke up, because you were like those who've never really stayed with their children indoors and didn't have any knowledge. CST really proved a little bit of help, even if when they knew nothing about it. That's when they were like, so we can't do professional, we can't understand the jargon, but with CST's English and the breakdown, it's really simplified. That with the images, they can adapt to it culturally. And I think it's one of the best things that is happening. And I am looking forward to do it, working with parents and, working with you guys as we go along, and just giving us a thumbs up. And Pamela, for the great news, thank you so much about the UNICEF and the implementation of the e-learning. I hope people can get through this. It's really at your own pace, and you can only, not only for you, but only for the rest of the family members, you can all do it together. Because when you learn, you try to educate everybody around you. My perfect saying is, a child is raised by a village, but an autism child raises the consciousness of a whole village. So everybody, I want to thank you. Pamela, you want to close? If you have anything else to add on, you can finish. Anybody else who wants to close this, you can close, but don't leave the panel. You can go right ahead.
I think I have one thing for
Sure.
Pamela. Okay, so we know that many times when programs are implemented in the country, they tend to be within the city. And we have seen that even with ABA. What would they take for Autism Speaks and World Health Organization, and we mentioned UNICEF, to extend the reach to the remote villages that we have in Africa, where parents are really struggling? First of all, the children don't go to school, families don't know anything about what is happening to their children. How can Autism Speaks, World Health Organization, UNICEF, and professionals like come together to extend the reach of CST?
Sure, that's a really good question, Jane. So the approach, especially when we're talking about implementing at the at a country level, like within a ministry or a large organization like a UNICEF, the intention there is to train trainers who then can continue to train other people, right? And so that's the way that it can scale or spread. And then as they're training others, then we would continue to provide support in their training of other people. And I know that is a concern, particularly of UNICEF, and with this new project that we're working on with in Uganda, they're starting within rural areas.
That's really good. When it comes to rural areas, Jen has a very valid point there, because we really have to have the rural parents also get the program. They need the training because they don't have access to the internet, access to a lot of things. So as you said, Pamela, trainers are needed in the rural areas. We hope that it will reach a point where we can also reach out to them, because I know there are people who are the rural and they really want this program, but they just don't have access to it. So some of us who work in the mud in the rural areas, down when we go home, with this program, we can always catch up with the families down there and hear what they also have to say. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate that you guys are looking onto that.
Just to add, so we are also working on the CST in rural Kenya and rural Ethiopia. So Amina Abubakar and Professor Charles Newton have previously tested the program in Kilifi in Kenya, and our new study will also be there, and in the informal settlements in Nairobi. And in Ethiopia, we'll test it in Addis Ababa, so that's urban, but also in the rural Gurage zone. So the challenges that you're mentioning, remote, no internet, limited educational level, and no specialists, that is exactly the setting where we work. And one of the things that we've learned, so sort of reflecting on what Pam said, it is absolutely essential to train local trainers, because there is also huge language variety. So you might have your trained specialist from Addis Ababa who speaks Amharic but doesn't speak the local language in the rural area where we are working. So you need a local trainer who can make local adaptations and allow for language diversity. So we are definitely learning lots of lessons, but the CST is explicitly designed to also be used in rural, remote communities. And actually, high-income countries can learn a lot from that too, because there are lots of rural areas in the US. There are areas in the UK and in the Netherlands where needs are not being met. So the North can learn from the South.
Thank you, Rosa. So I think we're going to wind up this. And if you guys have links you want to share, I can post it under this video. If you have anything that you want to share, I can always post under this video. And I am so grateful to have you guys on this panel. I have been empowered, encouraged, educated, everything in one bowl. So don't leave the panel. We're just going to tell our viewers goodbye until next time. This is not just it. We still will have to come back sometime and give them more good news and more whatever is going on around us. So viewers, thank you. And you can say goodbye to this awesome panel today. I feel so blessed to have them today with me here. So bye. You guys can unmute and we can just say goodbye.
Thanks very much, Ruth.
Thank you very much. I'm very glad to be here.
Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you.
It's like I just from heart to heart in
Thank you so much, you
for
guys.
me.
You're
So
all
thank you very,
appreciated.
very much for being so close
Thank you.
in this huge world,
Thank you,
being so
Rosa.
close.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Rosa. Thank you, Jane, Sebastian, and Pamela. It's been a pleasure. And
Thank you.
yeah. So